It started with a text message, a few words, sent from one of the most powerful men on earth to someone he shouldn't. By the time it leaked, it wasn't just a scandal, it was a global spectacle. Tabloids, lawsuits, billion-dollar headlines. Jeff Bezos, the richest man alive at the time, exposed. But what the world didn't see was the operation unfolding behind the scenes. While millions were refreshing Twitter, a crisis team was already moving. Lawyers dialing phones, PR strategists crafting statements, investigators tracing the leak, reputation managers running simulations, and somewhere, behind closed doors, decisions were made that would control the narrative forever. Because here's the truth. When scandal hits, most people panic. Billionaires plan. Today, you're about to discover the invisible playbook used by the ultra-rich to survive scandals, silence headlines, and protect billions. And it all starts long before the crisis even happens. Because for billionaires, crisis isn't a surprise. It's a variable, already calculated. Long before the headlines, before the leaks, before the lawsuits, they're already playing the game 3 moves ahead. Inside boardrooms with no windows, in late-night strategy calls with people whose names will never appear in the media, they build what insiders call crisis protocols. Imagine this. While you're thinking about weekend plans, somewhere there's a billionaire rehearsing for a scandal that hasn't even happened yet. They simulate possible threats like a war room exercise. What if a lawsuit drops? What if personal messages leak? What if a business partner turns whistleblower? Each scenario mapped, each reaction scripted. There are folders, literal or digital, filled with pre-drafted statements. There are lawyers on monthly retainers, just waiting for the first sign of trouble. There's a dedicated line at the PR agency, ready for what they call reputation events. Because when the storm comes, speed is currency, and hesitation is exposure. The blueprint covers everything: who speaks first, what tone to use, which journalists to brief, which influencers to distract the narrative, which legal levers to pull, temporary restraining orders, cease and desist letters. Even the choreography of their public appearances is pre-planned. Smile here, decline to comment there, leak something by accident if needed. And here's the part that almost no one talks about. Many of the biggest scandals you've seen were already gamed out months or even years before they happened. Because in the billionaire world, you don't wait for the fire. You build the exits long before the first spark. But of course, a blueprint means nothing without the people who execute it. And that is where things get even more interesting. A billionaire never fights alone. While the public imagines a CEO typing out a statement or nervously pacing in a corner office, the reality is far more orchestrated. Behind every controlled headline, behind every strategic silence, there's a team. A small, highly specialized group whose only job is to make the problem disappear. First, the lawyers, but not just any lawyers. Media litigation experts. People who know exactly how to issue a legal threat that stops a story before it even prints. They craft cease and desist letters with surgical precision. And when needed, they file emergency injunctions, buying precious time. Then, the PR crisis managers. These are not your average brand consultants. These are former journalists, ex-political campaigners, experts in narrative manipulation. They don't just react to bad news, they design the counter-narrative, shifting focus, reframing blame, flooding the media with distraction stories. Next, the reputation specialists. They monitor social sentiment in real time, deploy SEO teams to bury negative articles, and coordinate with friendly outlets to publish positive pieces that dilute the scandal. But when things get more sensitive, the real operators step in. Private investigators, ex-intelligence agents, digital security firms who can trace leaks back to their source, sometimes even hacking the hackers. In high-stakes situations, these teams run background checks on potential whistleblowers and quietly build legal cases against them, just in case retaliation becomes necessary. And for scandals with emotional fallout, there's another layer. Family lawyers, psychologists, professional mediators, experts who manage divorces, internal family disputes, and reputation risks tied to personal behavior. And when the threat comes from within their own inner circle, non-disclosure agreements get deployed like shields. Silence is bought. Everything moves fast. Meetings happen in person. Phones are left outside the room. Paper trails are avoided. This isn't crisis management, it's crisis warfare. But here's the part almost no one realizes. By the time the public hears about the scandal, this invisible team has already been working for days, sometimes weeks. And while most people are still reacting emotionally to the first headline, the Billionaire's defense system is already on phase 2. Because true control doesn't start with a reaction, it starts with preparation. And that leads us to the next layer of this strategy: how billionaires engineer their lives to withstand a crisis before the crisis even exists. For billionaires, defense doesn't begin when the crisis hits. It begins years before. Every contract, every asset, every public appearance is part of a larger strategy: crisis immunity engineering. Let's start with the money. While most people hold assets in their own names, billionaires use layers: trusts, foundations, shell companies, offshore accounts, each designed to make lawsuits, settlements, or even court rulings incredibly difficult to enforce. If a divorce erupts, their wealth is already segmented, protected by prenuptial agreements so detailed, they anticipate scenarios most people wouldn't dare imagine. What happens if there's a scandal that damages their personal brand? They've already separated their personal identity from their business interests. The board, the shareholders, the legal structures, all designed to shield the core of their empire from personal mistakes. And it doesn't stop there. Media consultants are hired long before any negative story appears. They build a positive digital footprint so large that when bad news eventually surfaces, it's buried under years of carefully crafted content. Some billionaires even run crisis simulations, just like a fire drill, only the fire is reputational collapse. They role-play scenarios, leaks, lawsuits, social media explosions. Every reaction timed, every spokesperson briefed. They don't just hope the worst won't happen, they assume it will. And when it does, they want to control not just the damage, but the entire narrative. Because in their world, perception is leverage. But even with all this engineering, sometimes reality hits harder than expected. And that's when the real test begins. Can the system hold when the scandal goes public? And to answer that, we need to look at real stories, real billionaires, real escapes from disaster. For all their preparation, even billionaires face moments where the system gets tested, live, in front of the world. Let's start with Jeff Bezos. In 2019, the National Enquirer published leaked private messages exposing an affair that Bezos never intended to make public. For most people, such a scandal would mean instant humiliation. For Bezos, it became a masterclass in narrative control. Instead of hiding, he did something unexpected. He went on the offensive. In an open letter, he accused the tabloid's parent company of blackmail and extortion. He shifted the story from personal failure to corporate misconduct, and it worked. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about his affair anymore. It was about press freedom, privacy, and abuse of media power. While millions debated journalistic ethics, Bezos quietly protected his business reputation. Amazon stock barely flinched. Now, consider Elon Musk. Over the years, Musk has faced SEC investigations, public lawsuits, and even defamation claims. Each time, he leveraged the chaos. When the SEC fined him over tweets that affected Tesla's stock price, he paid the fine, stayed in control of the company, and turned the narrative into a fight between innovation and bureaucracy. His social media following? It only grew stronger. And then there are the family dynasties, old money with older tactics. Some have faced massive lawsuits, internal family betrayals, or financial investigations, yet remained untouched in the public eye. Because they don't just manage crisis, they erase it. Buying silence, settling before court, locking files behind NDAs, and when needed, reshaping history through carefully placed media profiles. But none of this happens by accident. It's the result of years of preparation and minutes of decisive action when the moment comes. Yet there's another layer most people never see. Because beyond lawyers and PR teams, there's a more subtle, more psychological weapon at play. And it's time to uncover that. Not every battle is fought in courtrooms or press conferences. Some of the most effective billionaire tactics are invisible. Timing is everything. When bad news is inevitable, they don't wait for the leak. They control when and how the story breaks. It's called information timing. Releasing the story late on a Friday, when weekend distractions will bury it, or dropping it during a bigger news cycle, letting global events swallow their scandal whole. And if silence isn't enough, diversion becomes the next tool. Suddenly, a charity donation gets announced, a new product launch appears, or a calculated leak shifts public attention. Sometimes they even create a smaller scandal to distract from the real one. And then there's media shaping. Relationships with journalists aren't built overnight. They're cultivated over years. Strategic interviews, exclusive access, inside scoops, all designed to build loyalty, or at least buy silence when needed. If a reporter crosses the line, access gets cut, stories dry up, future opportunities vanish. And behind the scenes, NDAs get deployed like landmines. Employees, partners, even friends, all legally bound to say nothing. For the most sensitive situations, there's one final move: buying silence. Settlements with strict confidentiality clauses, 6, 7, sometimes 8 figures, just to ensure one more story never sees the light of day. Because in the billionaire world, truth isn't about facts, it's about control. But even with all these weapons, even with all this planning, sometimes the system cracks. And when it does, the fallout is catastrophic. For all the layers of protection, for all the silent teams and strategic maneuvers, sometimes the machine breaks. And when it does, the fall is brutal. Take the Murdoch family. For decades, they controlled one of the most powerful media empires in the world. But in 2011, the news of the world phone hacking scandal exploded. Journalists were accused of illegally accessing voicemails, targeting celebrities, politicians, even crime victims. The public outrage was unstoppable. Despite years of narrative control, the scandal forced Rupert Murdoch to shut down the 168-year-old newspaper. Executives resigned, investigations deepened, and for the first time, the Murdoch empire looked vulnerable. Then there's Elon Musk again. Not all of his controversies were contained. When he called a British cave rescuer a pedo guy on Twitter, a defamation lawsuit followed. Though Musk won the case, the trial dragged personal details, corporate ethics, and Musk's impulsive behavior into public scrutiny. His legal team scrambled. PR advisors worked overtime, but the stain on his public image lingered. And for other billionaires, the damage was even more permanent. Reputations destroyed, board seats lost, shareholder revolts, regulatory investigations that stretched for years. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Even with infinite resources, even with the best crisis engineers on speed dial, some scandals become too big, too fast, too public to fully contain. And when that happens, the system designed to protect them becomes a cage of their own making. But despite these failures, one rule remains constant in the world of billionaires. They never let the story end on someone else's terms. Because survival isn't about avoiding the fall, it's about writing the final chapter. By now, you've seen the layers. The pre-written statements, the silent teams, the legal shields, the narrative distractions, and even the moments when the entire system breaks. But here's the deeper truth. What we, the public, experience as breaking news is rarely spontaneous. It's the final move in a much longer, much quieter game. Every scandal you've read about, every public apology, every carefully worded denial was likely the end result of weeks, sometimes months, of behind-the-scenes calculation. Because for billionaires, crisis isn't just an event, it's a battlefield. And every headline, every social media trend, every leaked document is a weapon or a shield. They choose when to engage, when to stay silent, and when to rewrite the narrative altogether. And while the world debates, while social media explodes, the real decisions, the real power plays happen in private rooms, on encrypted calls, between people whose names you'll never know. This is not about truth, it's about control. And that's why, next time you see a billionaire scandal unfold, look closer. Ask yourself, who benefits from this headline? Who shaped this story? And most importantly, what are they distracting you from? Because for every public scandal you see, there are 10 others that never make the news. If this video changed the way you see power, wealth, and media control, now's your moment. Share this with someone who still thinks headlines tell the full story. Hit subscribe, because here we go deeper. At Bull Secrets, we don't chase the noise. We uncover the architecture behind it. And trust me, this was just one chapter. The next one might already be unfolding right now.